Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into Facilities in Focus. My name is Mackenna Moralez, and I am the Associate Editor of FacilitiesNet and the host of this very podcast. This season of Facilities in Focus, we are covering all things safety and security. And as our listeners may know, I am seemingly afraid of everything, and you can tell by past episodes of how squeamish I get on topics. But something that is a legitimate fear of mine is building fires. So I thought there was no one better to talk to about this topic than Shawn Mahoney. Shawn is a senior engineer in the Technical Services Division at the National Fire Protection Association. Shawn utilizes his technical expertise to support a variety of projects across NFPA, including building and life safety of fire protection systems, emergency response, electrical and industrial and chemical engineering. He is a registered professional engineer and holds a master's degree in fire protection engineering. Shawn is also the vice president of the New England chapter of the Society of Fire Protection Engineers. But thank you so much for joining me today, Shawn. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
It's a very impressive resume, and I thought, who better to talk to about my fear of fires? And
Yeah.
so I did mention that in the intro, and this is a fear that I am only just now willing to admit to myself for the first time. So, what are some of the leading causes of fires, or building fires, so that I don't do them?
I mean, there's one of the leading causes of fires, like in general, is the occupants. It's right. It's like what you put in the building. Like it's very
Okay.
easy we design buildings to be able to protect against fire. So whether that's putting in fire protection systems like a sprinkler system, fire alarm systems, we're putting in rated construction, right? We can easily, not easily, but like we can protect against that fire. It's usually what the occupants bring in, which becomes the fuel load, right? So we're bringing in combustibles, we're bringing in furniture, things like that. And then we're bringing in different types of ignition sources, whether it be electrical appliances or doing different kinds of work that's like hot work. All of that could be that cause of the fire.
Mhm. I have learned that so many things can explode on their own as an adult. Like someone told me, granted, we are in a time machine right now. We are recording this podcast right before the holiday season. And I know that holiday lights tend to be a big deal when it comes to building fires. And when I was growing up, a house down the street from mine blew up because of Christmas decorations.
Interesting. I'd want to learn. I want to learn more about what caused that to happen because Christmas decorations on their own aren't necessarily going to do that. But uh,
They said it was the Christmas lights. And so now every holiday season I get very and like we have an artificial tree and I still get very paranoid about fires.
artificial trees are definitely good. They're tested, listed, they're safe. Obviously you want to check your electrical connections and all of that. But yeah, uh, naturally cut trees are a significant issue, mostly because they rely on proper maintenance to make sure that they're properly watered, they have the right moisture content, and that's not going to cause an ignition. And like that's not just a problem at homes. Obviously, we have Christmas trees a lot at home, and it's harder to try to maintain that. But if you bring naturally cut trees into a building, the same thing applies, right? You're going to need to constantly water it, make sure you're checking the moisture, all of that. And for the most part, uh, building code, fire codes aren't necessarily going to let you bring like naturally cut trees into specific parts of a building. So
Right. And then how often should building fire systems be tested or maintained?
So there's a lot of different systems, and we could talk about all of them because they're all a little bit different, and it's usually typically we're looking at an annual test and then either like a quarterly or a monthly inspection.
Okay.
So for example, our sprinkler systems, for the most part, most of the components we're going to be inspecting them on like an annual or inspecting them on like a quarterly or a semi-annually basis, making sure that, the sprinkler valves look like they're going to like they're in the right position, they're going to operate, there's no leaking, any of that stuff. And then on the annual basis, you're going to flow water out of the test connection, make sure you're getting proper water flow. You're going to inspect every sprinkler in the building, making sure it's not damaged. You're going to be doing a full flow test on your fire pump, making sure that all of that you're getting the right performance out of your fire pump. And all that happens at more of that annual basis. So for sprinklers, fire alarms the same way. We're doing inspections on all of our pull stations, our notification appliances, usually on a quarterly, semi-annual basis. And then annually, we're doing all those tests to make sure our notification appliances work, our initiating devices, our smoke detectors, all of those work. And that happens on that annual basis.
Should you test them more frequently the bigger the occupancy is on buildings? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So like you talk about like maybe like risk wise, like if you have more people
Yeah,
in an occupancy
right.
looking at that. Yeah. So for the most part, the inspection, testing, and maintenance of fire protection systems is not usually based on the risk of the occupancy. They're all the testing and maintenance is the same because the system is going to go through the same wear and tear. Now, if you're in an occupancy where maybe you're creating a not normal atmosphere, so maybe if you've got a lot of dust in the air, um, or just things like that, then maybe you're going to be looking at potentially increasing some of those frequencies. But that would be, you would rely on a qualified person to be able to determine that.
Right. And you would think as someone that is kind of afraid of fire, and like for reference, never been in one. Never been in one,
It's good.
don't know anyone that's been in one. So don't really have this reason for this fear. But you would think that I would be a little bit more alert when it comes to fire alarms, because I feel like most people, we're just so used to them from having to do them monthly in schools that
Yeah.
I don't think people take them as seriously, myself included. Like whenever our fire alarm goes off, I just like tend to look around,
Yep.
see if anybody else is getting up. How can facility managers get people to take these tests more seriously?
Yeah, I mean, getting fire drills are not fire drills, but the people's reaction is one of the biggest issues when it comes to like protecting people from fire because it happens for everybody. The alarm goes off, and the first instinct is to just look around and see what everyone else is doing. People like don't want to leave what they're doing to like exit the building, right? So that's always an issue to try to like get people to understand what a fire alarm is. And there's like the first thing is let's have fire drills. Let's train the employees like what it means. So right now, NFPA, like we're fully remote, so we don't really have offices. But back when we were in the office, we would do I think it was every 6 months, we'd have a fire drill. And like we took it very seriously even to the point where like they would block off random stairwells, right? And you'd have to figure out how to get out.
Oh
And
my
like
God.
everybody was very involved um in the fire drill. So like that's a big thing. Just education on like what it means, what to do, and reducing nuisance alarms. So we want to make sure that when the fire alarm goes off, it
Mhm.
is either a drill that we've already planned or it is actually a fire, right? If we have a lot of nuisance alarms, whether it's we're not maintaining our fire alarm system properly or we have the wrong initiating devices installed and we have a lot of nuisance alarms go off, people just get numb to that sound and they're not going
Right.
to really respond to it's that fire alarm going off.
Right. I didn't even think about that. I had a very sensitive fire alarm in one of my apartments and probably would have never taken that seriously if it were to go off and it would be real. Now the
Yeah.
blocked off staircases, that makes me nervous.
Well, it
They
wasn't
look
blocked off, but there was signs, and it'd be like, "Don't go down the stairwell." And be like, "Okay, you have to," because that's the other thing. Most people are gonna go. 90% of the people in a building are gonna go out the way they came in, right? Because that's the
right.
way they remember, and that building codes know that, and that's why we have to size our main entrances to be able to support. It's 2/3 of the occupant load. Like a lot of that is understood, but because of
Mhm.
that, people don't realize where the other exits are, right? So if
Right.
that main entrance was blocked you've got to know how to be able to get out of the building. That's why we have exit signage and all of that, but people don't necessarily pay attention to that on a day-to-day basis.
Right. I'm thinking about where I sit in our office and how I can get across the building to the other exit if something were to happen, because I sit very close to the kitchen. And
Yeah.
just always of concern. But how can facility teams collaborate with local fire departments or emergency services before these type of tests or to help prepare their emergency plans?
Yeah, that's a great thing for facility managers to do, is to work with the local fire department. And typically you're going to be reaching out to like the fire prevention bureau or the fire prevention group or the fire prevention officer is who you're usually going to work with, and reach out to them and say, "Hey, this is my building. Can we work together so we can properly prepare if there is a emergency, and then so that the fire department can also prepare," right? They have pre-incident plans that are usually on all of their trucks, that if they're going to 123 Main Street, they open it up. Now it's on the tablet, right? They're pulling it up and it's telling us it's this type of construction. These are the occupancies, or these are the hazards in the area, right? So they have pre-incident plans. Like, you can help them create those, and then they can educate you on what they need in an emergency, which is usually fire department access, be able to get to the fire lane, be able to get to all the equipment that they need to use, and to understand what your evacuation procedure is. Where is everybody going in the event of a fire?
What are some common mistakes that you see facilities make when they make their fire emergency plans?
I don't I wouldn't necessarily say it's making bad plans. I think it would be, first of all, not planning at all, right? And not
Right.
updating those plans. That's the big thing. Buildings are constantly changing. And if there's one thing about fire protection systems, is like, they're static. They're there. They were designed, they were installed, but we need to make sure that we're not changing the building around them or changing the way we're using the building around those systems,
Right.
and as well as around all those plans. So we need to make sure that we're constantly updating them and that we're constantly training people so they understand what they need to be doing in the event of emergency.
Right. I know that a lot of people recommend that facilities have like a safety captain on
Hmm.
their team. Is it worthwhile to have more than one safety captain?
On their team, yeah. So there are requirements in like the life safety code for fire wardens, I believe, or fire safety officers. I can't remember what they refer to them as. And that would be like a person on the floor responsible for making sure you're evacuating right. Yeah, definitely you want to have more than one, because, and depending on how, it all also depends on like the occupancy. Like, if it's an office building, what happens if that person didn't come in that day, right? And that's going to be the day your emergency happens, right? So yeah, you definitely want to have redundancies in those types of plans.
Right. I just like, do you remember that? Did you watch The Office?
Oh yeah,
Right? Just the episode where they did their fire alarm and just how chaotic it was. I imagine that's how most facility, well, no. I imagine that's how,
definitely most facilities don't have Dwight Schrute going in there and lighting fires in the bathroom. So
right. But I do imagine some people approach that very chaotically and don't really know how to react. And like you said before, practice kind of makes perfect in a
yes, yeah,
sense.
definitely. And practice and just being educated and knowing what to do. People tend to think that that the reaction is going to be like what happens in the office. Everyone's just running around screaming.
Mhm.
No, it's usually a pretty calm collective thing. It's just getting people to start moving. If you practice something enough, then it's a pretty simple thing to be able to go forth with.
Yeah, and people should like not grab things, right?
No,
Leave
yeah, you
things
definitely just
behind.
want to get out of the building. The same thing comes down to like fire extinguishers, right? Usually there's a lot of thought. There's like two thoughts on fire extinguishers, right? The first thought is like, I don't want anyone touching fire extinguishers, right? If there's a fire, you get out of the building. Um, but then some people say, well, if it's a small incipient fire, then maybe we want the occupants to try to put it out. But again, that's all like, are we training our occupants how to use fire extinguishers? Are they readily available? That would be the only
Mhm.
time maybe you would be using them. But typically we've got a sprinkler system in the building. for the most part, if we're talking like commercial buildings, we're going to have a sprinkler system. We're going to have a fire alarm system. The sprinkler system, if it activates, is going to control the fire. Um, so that's going to give us all the time that we need to get those occupants out. We don't need to have manual intervention with a fire extinguisher or something like that.
So where I'm recording this interview today, there's a big window right in front of me, and I wasn't ignoring you. I was looking to
Yeah.
see where our sprinklers were on the ceiling, and you said that the water should be tested annually, right?
You'll do a flow test. So there's a couple different tests that you would do with like testing the flow of the water. You want to test your flow switches. So there's actually an alarm that will trigger the fire alarm system that our sprinklers flowing by what the flow of water will cause like a vein in there to open up. So we test that semi-annually by flowing water out of an inspector's test, right? So that's just a little bit of water. But then
Oh,
on an annual basis, for the most part, we're gonna have we're doing either a main drain test, which is like a big pipe out the side of the building, where we're gonna flow as much water as we possibly can out of the drain and test to make sure that we have a good flow of water, it doesn't seem obstructed. If we have a fire pump in the building, then on an annual basis, we're actually connecting up to a test header on that fire pump, and we're flowing basically the most amount of water we can possibly get out of that fire pump and making sure that it's able to supply the needed water. And then you compare it against, the years past test to make sure that we're not degrading in water supply.
okay. I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to put my dad on blast during this, and it's okay because he does not listen to this. But he was at work and he was in a forklift and knocked the sprinkler head off of one of their sprinklers,
Yep.
and it was just black water
Yep.
came out.
Dirty black
And
water.
and he said that the water hadn't been tested in like years.
So the water in a sprinkler system, because it is basically just black steel pipe, and it's just water that sits in there, doesn't move at all. It's gonna get black, dirty, not, it's not potable water. We won't be able to drink it.
Right.
And that's fine. The water in a sprinkler system is not a problem, like the quality of the water itself. And that's why water purveyors typically require you to put a backflow preventer in so that any of the water in the sprinkler system can't get back into our drinking water. But most of that water in that sprinkler system is sitting there for years and years and years. Even if we're testing the water flow, usually doesn't happen. It doesn't cause all of the water to flow out of the sprinkler system. So it's not like we're replacing it.
Right.
And it's usually just dirty black water that comes out when a sprinkler initially activates.
They did have to have to replace the water. It was the thing.
Yeah.
I always thought that was an interesting thing that they had to endure, basically. But what steps should be taken immediately after a small fire or a near miss incident occurs?
Yeah. So I think the first step would be making sure that first of all, that the fire department was called, right? And checking to make sure that we followed all of the emergency procedures that we had in our plan. And if they weren't followed, like what do we need to do to make sure that they are followed? And to make sure that is there anything in our plan that didn't work right? And that's why we had that miss. So do we need to update our emergency plans at all? But I think the biggest thing is say we have a near miss. The biggest thing is making sure we report it so that proper people know and that we're investigating it to make sure that it won't happen again. It's pretty easy to say like, "Oof, that was close. Like, let's keep going." But no, let's make sure that doesn't happen again because next time we might not be as lucky, right?
So so let's just say we have a new facility manager on staff. He's done the thing of he knows where that he needs to test the systems either biannually. He's gotten in contact with the emergency departments just to like let them know that he exists. What else should facility managers incorporate in their emergency plans?
I think one of the like least done things, or not least done things, but least paid attention to things is just like I talked about the change, like the building is constantly changing. So having a good understanding of what systems are in place in the building, what strategies are we using to protect the people in the building, and like what was that designed for, and making sure that we're still using the building the same way. You can significantly change, say you're in a warehouse, right? Sprinkler system is designed specifically for what's being put on those pallets, even to what types of pallets we're using, how high they're being stacked, how far apart everything is. If you start changing any little bit of that, all of a sudden your sprinkler system might not be capable of controlling a fire that occurs. So you need to understand what that was designed for and say, oh, we want to go from wooden pallets to plastic pallets. That's a significant change. We need to reevaluate our fire protection system and make sure it's still able to protect against that fire.
So kind of like whenever you bring something new in, you should reevaluate.
Yeah, anytime you're changing occupancies is a big thing, right? So if we're going from like an office area to maybe like an assembly or a restaurant or something like that, if we're changing occupancies, usually you're going to get the fire department or the like the building officials involved. You're going to need a permit change for a change in use and stuff. But like simple things of like change in processes could cause a change of how you're using that building. So that's what, you would want to look at.
Right. Is there, I'm sure in the codes it's probably written, but are there stuff that you recommend that people don't bring into offices just because they're a little bit more flammable?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things, hazardous materials in general, flammable liquids, all of that. Like that's things you're not going to want to bring in. And then looking at furniture, paying close attention to what type of furniture you're bringing into the building. Obviously, you want to look at the types of upholstery that's on the furniture, making sure that it's listed, and all of that. So paying attention to the type of furniture you're putting in those areas is important. And that's the stuff that like people might bring in, like couches from home or chairs from home, like that kind of stuff. If you're getting stuff from a reputable supplier of furniture, usually they've paid attention to all of that, but that would be one thing.
How would something like furniture catch on fire?
So like electrical, if you're running, say you're running extension cords, which you should not be using extension cords more than a temporary use, but say you're running an extension cord through like a couch or something like that, that could be a cause. Like one of the biggest causes of fires is going to be electrical, right? It's one of the biggest ignition risks in a building. So,
right. My father-in-law is an electrician, so got that. Maybe that's how I got this fear, is that they always tell me about the electrical fires, and they all seem so scary. But I know that wildfires aren't really your area of expertise, but I do just have one question because it seems like wildfire season is all year round now.
yes.
How can buildings prepare for that? Prepare their buildings inside, prepare their buildings outside for it?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing would be preparing your building outside, because I mean, you want to make sure that your building is not going to be involved or cause the spread of a fire or even cause an ignition, right? That would be bad. So a lot of the research NFPA has, NFPA's Firewise, a lot of that is based on more residential homes, because that's where we see a lot of the bigger losses, and that's where a lot of more of the research is focused on. But these types of things can apply to commercial properties as well. And a lot of the recommendations is around the different areas around the building. So we've got like the immediate zone around that building, the first 0 to 5 feet. That's where we want to make sure that if we have embers flying, we don't want them landing, causing a fire that could then spread to the building. So we want to make sure that there's no combustible materials there. So you should really try not to use things like bulk or mulch or like wood piles or like having any plants that are dying and dry. Like you don't want that up next to that building.
Right.
And then what also comes to that is making sure that the building is properly maintained so that we don't have any entry points that an ember could get onto the building and then cause a fire to spread into the building. Just as simple as making sure that we're cleaning the gutters, or like if we've got a flat roof, making sure we're getting all of the leaves and things off of the roofs, because the leading cause of a fire starting in your home or your building is an ember flying in the air and then landing next to the house, igniting usually the gutters or mulch right next to the house, and then that causes the fire to spread to the house. So that's, you want to pay attention to that immediate zone, making sure that we don't have combustible materials. And then the intermediate zones, the zones further out, we want to make sure we've got fire breaks. We're paying attention to our tree cover. One of the things that you want to make sure is that if we have ladder fuels, we don't want ladder fuels. So basically, if we have a tree, we don't want to have a lot of combustibles underneath it, because that would cause a fire that would ignite under a tree to then cause that entire canopy of the tree to ignite. So paying attention to what types of fuels we have in the area, that's definitely helpful in a wildfire.
No, I think those are really good points to make. And then I don't know if you can answer this question, but when the LA fires happened last year, I think it was, I saw a video of someone trying to evacuate, but before they evacuated, they sprayed their roof with their hose. Is that necessary to do?
There's not a lot of research that I am aware of right now as far as like systems to wet roofs. Obviously, that would have an impact, but I don't necessarily know enough about that to be able to say whether that'd be good or bad. I mean, I know there's certainly plenty of stories of people who would stay and defend their homes and stuff. Whether that's probably not advisable to do. And there's a lot of systems and stuff out there. I just don't know enough to really talk to what's good or bad or
no, that's totally fair. As we have learned so far in this conversation, I would leave.
Yes,
I would.
The biggest thing to prepare as well is like, all right, the fire's here, right? You want to understand what your evacuation procedures are going to be before you need to evacuate, right? So understanding where your evacuation routes are, paying attention to, because the fire department's going to be letting you know whether you're in an evacuation area, and listening to them. If they tell you to leave, you need to leave. That's the best. You want to protect yourself over the building, right? So get everybody out before you're, trying to defend yourself.
For our first season of this podcast, I interviewed Maureen Ruskowski, and she was in the Maui wildfires, and she gave the advice of have a go bag ready at all times. What is something that facility managers can have in their go bag in like a commercial building?
That's a good question. I don't, I mean, there's not, other than having like the contact information for, the fire department and things like that. I don't know if there's anything I'd necessarily for like a commercial building other than like having stuff yourself to be able to survive. So like food, water, all that kind of stuff. That's probably the most important. A lot of the I would say making sure that you have a way that your needed documentation is going to survive the fire. So whether that's storing it electronically or storing it in a firebox or something like that, you don't need to be taking all that with you. But definitely like personal things to make sure that you can survive. It's important.
Right. Do firebox actually work?
Yeah, they certainly would help. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Fire safes are good.
You.
Yeah. I use them. I never thought twice about it. But I store everything electronically too, so it wouldn't matter.
Right. But what should facility managers prioritize in post-fire recovery to restore operations safely and quickly?
Yeah, first thing I would prioritize is making sure that we're getting fire protection systems back up and operational. Usually if we have a fire, that means sprinklers have activated. So we're going to need to get the fire protection contractor in. We're going to need to be replacing the sprinklers that were activated, getting the system back up. Same thing with the fire alarm system. So if we've got smoke detectors and things that were in the area of the fire, those all have to be replaced. And make sure that system gets up and operational, because if we don't have those systems operating, then we can't reoccupy the building. So those would be the things that I would prioritize. Obviously, being a fire protection engineer, those are the things I'd prioritize.
Yeah. I know that we're running a little short on time, so I just have one last question, but is there any advice that you would give to facility managers during times of fires and how to just like chill out, I guess.
Yeah, so you're talking about like during times of wildfire or during just like if there's a fire in your building? So I don't know if you
If
would
there's a fire
necessarily.
in your building.
I don't know if you'd necessarily chill out. This is the thing. If there's a fire in your building, hopefully you've prepared for this and this is you understand the things that you need to do. So it's not necessarily a crisis or an emergency. It's just something you need to get through. And there's systems in place in the building. And as a facility manager, you should understand them all that we've got sprinkler systems there to control a fire. We've got the fire alarm system to help detect and notify. Like it's all there. So just make sure that we're doing that proper maintenance and inspection and testing of these systems so that in the event of an emergency, everything gets controlled quickly. It obviously makes the outcome a lot better.
Right. And just remember, practice does make perfect.
Yes.
And that's why we need to have drills. They serve a purpose in this world. They're not annoying.
And even as a facility manager, you're going to most likely be the point of contact for the fire department if a fire does occur. So understanding where you need to be when the fire department arrives and what information they're going to want, and how to access all the stuff that they're looking for. Usually they're going to want the fire alarm panel so they can see what's activating. They're going to want to get to the fire pump room. If you've got a fire command center in the building, that needs to be opened up. And they might be asking you for information on like who's evacuated, where everybody is, like understanding all that information that you need to provide to them, and where you need to go in order to give that information to them. So practicing all of that and understanding that before it happens is definitely important.
And Shawn, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I mean, just the biggest thing is making sure that we're inspecting, testing, and maintaining all those fire protection systems. Because usually they're like the last thought of thing in a facility. It's usually like a hindrance to do things. We've got to comply with the building codes. We've got to get a permit. We've got to do all this inspection and testing. But like that's all there to make sure that in the event of emergency, everything, everybody is protected, has time to evacuate. So that's one thing I would pay attention to a lot in a building.
It's not annoying because I'm sure there's someone in the building that is afraid of fires like me who has to take a picture to make sure of their hair straightener every day to make sure that it's off. So we got to make sure people stay safe. And that is the goal of this podcast always.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Shawn. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Facilities in Focus podcast. Facilities in Focus is a product of the facility market, which houses FacilitiesNet, building operating management, facilities maintenance decisions, and healthcare facilities today. Thank you to our sound and video editor, Paul Ellertson. Thank you to Morgan Johnson for designing our logo. Thank you to Dan Welton, Dave Lubach, Dan Hounsell, Jeff Warden, Jill McDermott, and everyone else at Trade Press Media Group. For comments, or if you are interested in being a guest on Facilities in Focus, please email us at fnpodcast@tradepress.com.